session. I hope you had a good lunch. We're here, and thank you all for coming. This session is going to be recorded and uploaded to the YouTube channel for ETE. And so this is the Building a Community in Online Classes and the Value of Discussions for Online Learning. And Andy Harris is here, and he is an assistant professor for the College of Education and Human Services in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies in ETE. So we'll turn the time over to you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. So I'm Andy, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies stationed down in Ephraim. Now, because I'm down in Ephraim, the entirety of my course load is either broadcast or online. In the 3 years that I've been in Ephraim, I've had one student in the classroom with me. Everything else is mediated through a screen. And whenever I talk to friends and family about my job, they always ask, well, isn't that hard, right, not being in the classroom with students? And my response is usually, it's not as hard as I thought it was going to be. It's actually been kind of fun to learn how to adapt to a different medium and different modality of teaching, and I actually find it quite enjoyable at this point. So I wanted to share with you something that I've found to be useful in one of my courses and recommend it to you, and hopefully if it works for you, you can implement it in your own courses. So I wanted to share with you kind of what I've learned, the process that I went to get to where I am, and then maybe share some of the mistakes that I've made along the way so that hopefully you can avoid them if you choose to implement this in your own course. So this was a student comment that I got this last semester, and it's true. Online courses just aren't the same as a traditional face-to-face course. This student in particular was telling me that they had started at Utah State, had kind of put a pause on their education to start a family, and now that they were coming back, had entirely moved online, and it just wasn't the same as when they were in the classroom. And I think the best way that I've figured out to kind of understand why that is comes from the idea of a community of inquiry. And if you're familiar with pedagogy, you might be familiar with this idea. But the community of inquiry suggests that there are three domains that we need to establish to have an effective educational experience with our students. The first is a teaching presence. This is where the instructor provides good feedback, facilitates good discussions, and does the teacher thing, and does it well to provide and facilitate a good educational environment. The second is a cognitive presence. Students need to be stimulated and engaged by the material in order to get the most out of their learning experience. But the final of these, and this is where I think online and broadcast courses really fall short, is the social presence, right? Being able to make connections with other students and develop relationships. And that's hard to do in a broadcast course when you're separated into a bunch of different classrooms, and it's even harder in an online course where maybe you see a picture of your classmates on Canvas, but that's not even 100%. And so it's really hard to make connections with each other. Now, I've started using video discussions in my class where it's much like a traditional discussion board, but instead of typing their responses, I require them to actually record themselves and upload the video of them talking about whatever the discussion topic is. And what I've found is that that helps to promote this social presence. So the course that I started doing this in is HDFS 4230. It's called Family and Social Policy. Now, this course is the intersection between what my students learn in our major of Human Development and Family Studies and political science. It's where those two things might intersect and meet. And so in this course, we talk about a lot of really non-controversial things, like the definition of marriage or abortion policy. sex education, or transgender issues. Like really just simple stuff, very boring class, non-controversial. It's in fact, we talk about a lot of really fun stuff. And I love this course, and it's really enjoyable to engage with my students on these very difficult topics. But I knew that I wanted a discussion component to this course, right? I wanted my students to absorb the readings, to read news articles of differing opinions and be able to synthesize and talk about them. But I didn't want these issues to devolve into a really negative experience like you might see on Twitter. And so I decided to do video discussions. And I did it for three main reasons. The first of these initially was because I wanted them to develop skills in expressing themselves orally. This is one of the IDEA course objectives that you can select. And in thinking about this course and those topics in particular, I realized that after my students leave my course, they're not going to be writing about those things. There's a good chance that they will never, again, after leaving this course, write about any of those topics. But there's a very good chance that they'll be talking about those topics to friends and neighbors about these issues. And so I wanted them to practice being able to talk, to communicate their ideas on these issues. The second, as I mentioned, is I didn't want my discussion boards to devolve into a really negative interaction like you might see on Twitter. I wanted us to be able to engage with each other, and unfortunately, the anonymity that comes through text makes it really easy to demonize and reject what somebody has to say. But if you can put a face to it and say, okay, that's a human being on the other side of the screen, it makes it easier to actually maybe think about and consider what they have to say. You don't have to agree with them, but you can say, okay, maybe this person is not a monster like I think they are. And then finally, the last point was kind of selfish. I wanted to get to know my students better. And so I wanted to actually see their faces and hear their voices. But it's this last point that ended up surprising me as I got feedback from my students semester after semester that they really enjoyed this, and this helped them get to know each other, which is what I hope to maybe convince you, because you might not have those first two as a goal. This was something specific to my class. But this last one, it helped me get to know them, but it also helped them to get to know each other in a really positive way. So in this course, I started doing these video discussions in the spring of 22. And about 5 weeks in, I wanted to just take a pulse from my class and see, okay, how's this going? And this was the feedback that I got. And on a scale of 1 to 7, please rate how you feel about the video discussions, not including the technical difficulties, because that was something that a lot of students were frustrated with. So it's like, okay, let's take that off the board. If there were no technical difficulties, how are you feeling about this? And what I found was that, you know, a good chunk of them here on the bottom side have very favorable opinions about the video discussion. And I thought, that's good news, right? This is something that I'm going to continue doing. I'm not going to change course right now. So we're going to keep going with it at this point. I did get a couple of good points of feedback from students. First, there were a couple of students, and this quote is just emblematic of them, but there were a couple of students who suggested switching the groups up week by week, because how I had structured these discussions is I put them into groups of about 4 students. And so every week they had those same 4 students that they got to, they had to post an initial recording of their thoughts on the material, and then they had to look at the other students in their group and respond to each of the other students, kind of the classic discussion board format that we all use. But we had a couple of students who said, like, hey, I wish we could just switch things up. Now, when I took this survey, ironically, I was just about to switch all the groups up because I was moving from sort of foundational knowledge on the topic to those difficult issues, and so I was going to switch people up. And what I found feedback at the end of the semester was that they did not like that. This student said, I feel as though I was finally getting the hang of it, and then you switch things up on me. So it's like, okay, I feel like that's fair. And I imagine that while I had a few students suggest that first one, I imagine that those are probably some of my more outgoing students who just like to get to know people, and maybe that's not as important as getting people comfortable so that they can actually have some of these discussions. So, do you have a question?
I just had a thought. I mean, but I think keeping it the same, especially as they have this foundation relationship, and it got stickier or trickier, that actually could be really great that they already have this relationship with those people.
Absolutely, and that is some of the feedback that I got from students, is having that relationship built over the semester. Once we got to some of those more difficult topics, it made it easier for them to actually engage in those discussions, right? So so in 2023, when I did this class again, I decided no more switching. We're just going to keep the same group through the semester. Now, I also had several students suggested, and I've gotten this both semesters because I decided against this, but they wanted kind of a mixed system where maybe the original post could be video and then we just write our responses to each other. Because as I alluded to earlier, one of the biggest frustrations with this system are the technical difficulties that some of the students experience. And so if they have to upload 4 videos every week, that can be really frustrating. I decided against that. I wanted to continue to do the video discussion fully. And so I didn't implement that in this most recent spring, but I'm still up in the air on this. I might implement this coming in the next spring. I still haven't decided on it. And if you have ideas, I'd love your input on it as well. So let's fast forward now to spring of 2023. It went so well in my HEFS 4230, I decided to also implement it in another one of my courses. This is HEFS 3570. It's an overview of adolescent development, and this one in particular is a broadcast course. So the students are already in the classroom a little bit with each other, but then I also had some video discussions. Now, we're not talking about some of those difficult concepts that we do in the other class, but I felt like it was useful enough of a system that I wanted to give it a try in a broadcast course as well. So at the end of the semester, this last spring semester, I asked my students, okay, what was your initial reaction to knowing that I was going to require these video discussions, and then how do you feel about it now? So now there's some issues with a retrospective pretest, but unfortunately, I didn't think about it until the end of the semester, and so this is the best that I've got for you. I'll do actual pre-post this coming year. But you can see that there's a massive swing here from generally very negative feelings about having to do a video discussion, and now very positive feelings about doing a video discussion at the end of the semester. And we can see a similar trend in that same family and social policy class, where initially when I told them at the beginning of the semester, hey, we've got these discussions, you're going to have to record yourself and then record feedback from other people. A lot of people not so sure about it. At the end of the semester, though, vast majority say it's a good thing. In fact, on this right, that very negative was just one person. Everybody else had a very positive view of the video discussion. Now, back to that student that I showed you at the very beginning of this. She said online classes just aren't the same, and it bums me out that I'm missing out on so much by not being in class or on campus. These video discussions are the closest thing I get to being in class and getting to know my classmates. Now I wish all of my online courses require them. It adds so much of the in-person setting to the online format. And this is the thing that really struck me as I got all this feedback, that I did this because I wanted those first two things, right? I wanted to help them develop the capacity to talk about these issues rather than write about them. I wanted them to treat each other with a little bit of compassion while they're talking about difficult concepts. But overwhelmingly, my students reference this, that this is not like any other online course I've taken. This feels more like I'm in a class, I'm in a classroom, actually engaging with my classmates, and that's why it's so valuable. And so, again, I just want to highlight, and this student isn't the only one who made this sentiment, but I wish all my online courses required these things, right? Having actual video discussion. So I would like to encourage you to consider adopting this. Now, I will echo what our keynote said earlier today. If it's a tool that doesn't work for you, Toolbox, don't worry about adopting this, but I would recommend that you consider it because I think it's really valuable. So I wanted to share with you some of the issues that I've run into with my students so that hopefully you can avoid them if you choose to adopt this kind of process moving forward. Oh, anyways, yeah, so this, I forgot about this slide. Would you recommend that I continue using video discussions in future classes? This is the breakdown on both of those classes. Overwhelmingly, yes. Again, that's just one person in the no column. They said they... Well, I'll share their feedback here in a second. Because it is an important thing to consider, and I would love your input on maybe how I can address that one student's concern. All right. So I also asked on that end of semester feedback, okay, what were the issues that you run into with this? Overwhelmingly, the three things that all fit in here are the time requirements, so how long it actually takes to do a video discussion, as well as I have some very specific timing of when they need to post their discussions. I think some students feel frustration with that.
Real quickly, what is the timing?
Oh, so let's see.
Sorry, I don't know.
No, you're good. Let's see.
Mine, I was trying to figure out how the timing works because they always wait till the last second.
Yeah, so this is how I do my discussions. Okay, so this is right out of my Canvas. I require that they make an initial post on Friday, March 31st. Right? Oh, well, I mean, whatever the Friday is of the semester, right? So they have all week to go through the material, and by the end of day on Friday, they need to have made their initial post. Then they need to respond to everybody else by Monday. So I set the due date for the discussion on Friday, so it appears in Canvas on their to-do list of Friday, I have to get this discussion done. And then on Saturday, I just hop on, change the due date to Monday, so it shows up in... Yeah, unfortunately. And there are times that I forget to do that, and those are often the weeks that my students forget to do their responses. So I wish there was a better way to do this. And again, if you have, yeah.
Just do two different discussions. But when you do that, though, you separate the original post from the other post.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, up here.
Yeah, I do a dummy discussion board where it adds in the extra deadline, like the second deadline. But that's what the assignment page says, is just go back to...
Okay. No, that's...
Like 0 point, more,
That's...
Yeah,
instead of an announcement, but it shows up on their to-do list.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
Canvas about
I have not. I have not. So I should do that. But yeah, so and in their feedback, hearing back from students, I feel like this is a common frustration, not just how long it takes them to do the discussions, which is tied to the technical difficulties that they had that I'll go over here in a second, but also these timings. Sometimes they forget about the due dates, and it's kind of difficult to get them on track. So let's go back here. Whoop, nope, I'm going backwards. Okay, no, you're good. I'm happy to interrupt and talk about this as we're going forward. So the another big issue are technical difficulties. Now, it seems like, if I were to guess, I'd say, well, I mean, it looks like about, what, 20% there? That sounds about right. About 20% of my students have some pretty serious technical difficulties doing the recordings. I don't always understand exactly how to help them. I always try to troubleshoot with them, but it can be quite frustrating to them. I get reports of students having to record and then re-record 4 or 5 times before it uploads, and that just makes the whole process pretty frustrating to some. So it seems to be that for most students, using Kaltura works best. So this is just a discussion post. And I always tell my students to look for the rainbow firework. It's up here next to the plug on that bar up there. So that is Kaltura's embedded recording software. That seems to work the best. Students can either record right from Kaltura here or upload a video that they've recorded on their phone. to do it, and that seems to work the best. I know Elisa over in City has told me that they have an entire set of instructions that you can put in your Canvas page that explains how to use Kaltura for a discussion board. So that seems to be the best tool. Canvas has its own like recording tool. If you go to Insert and then Media, you can record through Canvas itself, but that gets pretty glitchy. So Kaltura seems to work the best. Now, it also still has issues, though. I get notes like these from my students that, even with Kaltura, it still takes me hours to upload a video. And that's really frustrating if they have to respond to 4 different students. And that's really kind of problematic.
So is that upload time, or is that actual trying to make the recording time? Right? Is that really bad bandwidth? I have students that don't have running water. Let alone internet.
Yeah.
There's going to be some limitations even when they get internet. It's so slow.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. Ideally, hopefully they could get to a USU center where they could use the tools that we can provide to them in that situation. But yeah, that's another concern with adopting a system like this. It seems like the students who have the most issues have Apple products. Now, this just reinforces my prejudice that Apple is overrated and overexpensive, but yeah, it seems like if they're using a Mac computer, they have troubles. If they're using earpods, sometimes the audio just does not pick up until they disconnect their earpods. And I don't know. That's just the pattern that I've seen. I don't exactly know how to solve that. But usually if I have students with issues, that's one of the first things I ask them. Are you using an Apple product? And if they say yes, I say, well, some of my students have trouble with that. So again, I don't know what to do about that, but that is an issue that we run into. Yeah. Some of my more innovative students have done this of their own accord, and I've started suggesting it to others, though, is they will record the videos on their phone and then upload them to a private YouTube channel or to a Google Photos and then share a link to the video with their classmates, and that works flawlessly. I've never had any issues with doing that. It's some extra steps for them, but they don't have any recording issues when they do that. So if Kaltura is not working, I often recommend that they do that to the issue. So it's, I don't know, it's one of the unfortunate things about this video discussion that there are these technical difficulties. But if you guys choose to implement this and figure out a way to make it better, please let me know, because I would like to adopt it as well. All right, so we've got the time requirements. We talked about that. The other thing that we do with the time requirements is I recommend that students draft their thoughts ahead of time. Particularly, you can see my discussion post is pretty in-depth. I require a lot of them to talk about a lot of things in their post, and so I recommend that they draft ahead of time so they make sure they're hitting all the points required in the discussion post. This is just a sample for the abortion discussion. All right, now the majority of students, and I should have put the pie chart here, but the majority of students feel awkward doing the recording. Right, I had one student here who said that I hate seeing myself and hearing myself on video. And that's the truth. I also hate seeing and hearing myself on video. But I think that these video discussions are so valuable that I really encourage them to push forward. So the first thing to do is to acknowledge up front, when I tell them about these video discussions, I say, it's going to feel awkward at first, and that's okay. Everybody feels a little awkward as they're on camera. If you need to draft and just read your draft initially, I see a lot of students do that, and then over the course of the semester, they transition away from reading to actually talking, which is great. But yeah, it's going to be awkward, and that's okay. But hopefully we can push past it. Now, this is the one student who said, no, don't do these ever again. I hated this. This is the worst part of this class. My heart really went out to this student because I knew exactly which student this was. Because in class, she was very engaged. was there every week, would make comments in class, submitted beautiful writing assignments, but never submitted discussions. And I was looking at this, and I got this at the end of the semester. She said that for her mental health struggles, she would often record, but then just never uploaded it because she just had such crippling anxiety about this issue. And again, if you have any suggestions on how I might accommodate that one student, I would love to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the disability office would say about this. Just anxiety is one of the disabilities that they help students get accommodations for.
Right.
Seems like a classic.
I should, yeah.
Accommodation.
Yeah, I should reach out to them.
It's interesting because my students, I require that they present in front of the class. And I've actually offered a video as an option for people who do express like crippling anxiety about being in front of the classroom. I'm like, well, you can pre-record a video of what you're doing. And a lot of them have actually appealed to that, so I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. And again, this is one student, one semester, so it's hard to make a, yeah, up here.
You know, I don't feel that we're in a position where we ought to force that student to do a video. If that's the way they really feel, until we know them and we're in front of them, we can. Online, it's always different. You don't know who they are, even when they respond to you. So that brings up this question: is there a possibility that student could Zoom to the teacher and then you could record it?
Yeah.
Zoom and then share that with the student.
Well, and the other thought I have was instead of that, maybe just for that one student, have a private discussion board with me to just post, okay, here, you're the only one who gets to see this, and maybe that could help. But yeah, that's a good idea. There was coming here.
I just have a question. Do you think, like, if you had the option to not have the video on, would that detract from the impact of these video discussions? Like, if it was just an audio?
I don't know. I'm inclined to think no. I mean, looking at some of the feedback from my students, they really like being able to see facial expressions and how people are holding themselves. A couple of students commented that they liked that they could see, this sounds bad, but they liked that they could see when their classmates were uncomfortable talking about something versus when they were really passionate about talking about something. And you can get a little bit that with voice, but I think the visual is important to that. But again, I could be wrong. I don't know. This is.
I was just thinking about this once. Did the student ever reach out to you, like through the course of the semester? Because
no.
That I think is a problem. Like you probably could have accommodated the student had they reached out to you. Like
Yeah.
Any number of the ideas that we talked about, but because that student just didn't turn it in and didn't reach out, you had no way of knowing.
Right.
You know, till the end.
Yeah, and it's hard because I don't want to offer accommodations up front because I think more students than would actually need them would take them. I have one student in here that said, you know, thank you for pushing me outside of my comfort zone. That was really valuable. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's hard.
I mean, it's challenging. I don't know that it solves it, but like I offer, I want to have kids contribute in the classroom, right? It used to be a graded exercise that they, 5% of the grade, and then all this social anxiety came up, and it became a real frustration point for them, and so now I make it extra credit.
Right.
Right. So that makes, when you're trying to grade on a curve, that makes it a little challenging. But what I think about here is, you could have the written format being the default graded, right? And then you could give extra credit if people actually do a video.
Okay.
And then they can opt into the, to their preference.
Yeah, and that's an option. I don't think I would adopt it for this course because, again, I think the benefits of actually talking about these issues is more important even than the social aspect. But the social aspect is a big one.
Well, and to go to the writing one of the things that appeals to me, and Lance and I teach this in the class, and I've been kind of concerned, I have a research paper that because of ChatGPT I will probably get rid of. And I think that this is a great way to have students talk about what they're learning, what they're feeling, that they can't use AI for.
Right. No, yeah, that's a good idea. So.
Question doesn't have to go with this, but from your perspective on grading, I know you have the groups of 4 or 5 just so the students don't have to watch 3 hours of video.
Right.
But if you have a class of 40, 50, 100, and you have 5-minute video posts and then 3-minute responses,
they're each turning in 10 to 15 minutes. Are you watching videos for 2 days straight?
Yes and no. I love listening to things on 2 times speed. So drives my wife crazy. I try to share a podcast with her, and she's like, what are they even saying? And but yeah, so I listen to things on 2 times speed. And for me, and this is, I think, a product of my ADHD adjacent brain, grading a lot of written text makes me want to gouge my eyes out. But I can sit and watch my students for a long time. And so for me, it's a lot easier to grade a video discussion than to grade a text discussion. But that's just me. It might be different for you. So, yeah.
So along those lines, do you have a maximum length or a minimum length for them?
Nope, I don't have. I really hate minimum lengths with page requirements as well. I always tell my student, meet the requirements of the discussion, and because I don't like giving minimum page requirements because I feel like students fill them with fluff. If they've met the expectations, they can just be done. So I do have some students who are a little more long-winded, but for the most part, the average length is about 5 minutes on one of those posts. If they're really passionate, I've seen some go about 15, but for the most part, it's around 5 minutes that they talk about it. So, yeah.
I found it interesting that, with the anxiety component, because it seems almost like it's less, as someone had said before, less anxiety driven to be able to record it and know, oh, I didn't like what I said there, I'm going to edit it, I'm going to re-record it, and you can do as many edits or re-records before you post it. But with that being said, if you have it, did you ever run into like a student who posted something and they had regrets about it, and could they like remove the post?
I never saw that. I believe you can delete a post. So, yeah, I never saw that, or I haven't seen it yet. I've done this just a couple semesters, so, but it's been really fun. So yeah, here and then here.
Have you looked into any like third-party apps that might facilitate it better than Canvas?
I have not, and I'm hesitant to do so. I like to try and keep things as simple as possible, so as much as I can just keep it to Canvas, I would prefer that. Over here with the...
Could you give me an example of a discussion topic?
Yeah, so let's go back here. So this is my abortion topic. So one of the things that I make them do is make sure they understand all sides of an issue. So for this one, I ask them to summarize their positions of the right and left, meaning the political right and the political left on this issue. Then I have them kind of state their own position, and I force them to make a statement. I don't let them be wishy-washy. You have to actually say, this is how I would vote. This one's a little more nuanced because I want them to actually craft how they might design a policy. And then I have them reflect on what that says about their own individual philosophy and ideology that influences how they might vote on an issue like this.
Do they debate each other?
I have not seen like open debate back and forth. I do see, most of the time what I see in the responses are comments of, I'd never thought about it like that. I really enjoyed what you had to say. I still disagree, though. But I don't ever get a back and forth. And I wish there was more of that, but the way I've structured it, it really is just one response. So, yeah, here and then here.
I mean, it seems like a pretty exceptional situation, and so I wonder if you don't deal with it at all.
Right.
Or at worst, we always check the grades of our students. If somebody's not turning in things, they got a DF midterm or whatever, we're going to reach out to them.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you might ask if there's an issue, and then you just have a personal conversation.
Right. Yeah, and I think that is the approach. I guess I was fishing for if there was a way I could preload the solution to this one. But yeah, that probably is the answer to this because, it seems like the vast majority of my students, right, almost 100% said that they liked this, but I might just need to accommodate this in one student. Yeah, no, go ahead.
They're both upper division type classes. Have you tried it with any like basic 10-10 classes?
I have not. I've avoided doing it in my 1500 class because there's 150 students in there, and there I would be spending all week watching videos. So I've opted against doing that. So you had a question here.
Just a comment to address the question about third-party factors. It's called Flip. It integrates into Canvas that we
Okay.
a good option if they were looking for that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Did you say that you had used this in Connect classes? Or
No,
not?
no, I've never.
I'm wondering how that would work in a Connect class to help those statewide students.
I think it would be really valuable in that because, and I've got their feedback. I'd be happy to share that with anybody. But